fucking podcast day.
Takes you back to that time of when you remember what you were doing when you first listened to that album, or
What is going on, champions? That's right. Yes.
What up?
Podcast day. Two dudes talk music. Yes, and I've been stewing on this shit all day.
What is going on?
Yes.
It's that time. It's that time. Podcast time. Yeah, spill the beans, man. Spill the beans. We want it. We want this. The exclusive details.
What is happening, everybody?
We did
How
it.
you doing, my brother?
Oh man, you know I'm good. I just come back from Fiji, so you know I'm good and rested.
Yeah, you got a nice tan and all that
Dude,
shit.
got
Fell
that
asleep in the
nice-
sun, come back 3 shades darker and all that.
That's it, mate. But so much sunscreen. I swear I'm still peeling it off me skin, man.
Oh my man, yeah. So how was it though? Did you have a good time?
It was hot, great time. Kids had a mad time. Went to the waterfall, met the locals, did all that cool stuff. Listened to some island music the whole time. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They just had band. They just had 3 guys with guitars and ukuleles up there. Perfect.
Awesome, man. Sounds like it was a blast.
What about you, my friend? I know you came down to Sydney and
Yeah, mate. I've been so goddamn busy lately. Yeah, we did a trip to Sydney for a rehearsal for the Mosh Fest on High Street show. Once again, that is coming up 4th of February. So make sure you get your tickets. I'll put the link in the chat for everybody. And yeah, I've had a band in the studio recording a lot of shit.
Yeah, nice, dude. Busy Braff's a good rap.
And they're in they're in doing that shit. They're a punk band. We're doing a nice EP for those boys. So
Who is that again?
Unentitled.
Unentitled. Nice.
Yeah, they're good. Very good punk band. Lots of really cool songs. So I'm having a great time recording that, but it's just got me run off my feet, you know? So it's been about like a week and a half, 2 weeks non-stop at this point of just running around doing all sorts of different shit. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, so apologies again to everyone for missing some of our streams last week. As we mentioned, I was traveling to Sydney. Kyle was away in Fiji, so we had to have that little bit of a break there, but no worries. We are fully back in the swing of things. As a reminder, again, we have hit affiliate, which means you guys can now do paid subscriptions if you really want to support us. And what we do here, it's very, very much appreciated.
We do love it.
I will say as well, if you've got Amazon Prime, you actually get a free Twitch subscription every month. You do have to refresh it every month as to who you want to give it to. But so yeah, you've got one of those. So if you're not already giving it to someone and you want to support us, you can also swing that our way, and it's not even going to cost you anything extra. Even if you don't want to do a paid subscription, you are more than welcome to like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff. And everything helps support us. So if you know someone that you think might be a good fit to come on the podcast and talk to us, yeah, just throw them in the comments or in the chat. Tell them to get in contact with us for sure. And just as a reminder as well, we are looking for your crazy gig stories, crazy road stories. So if you've got anything wild that's happened to you from any aspect of the business, let us know. Send it in. Two Dudes Talk Music. It's all words, so TWO Dudes Talk Music @gmail.com. We will keep the stories completely anonymous, so we don't identify your email it came from. We change all of the names, so all the bands, venues, individuals involved, names will be changed to protect the guilty and innocent alike. And yeah, so we were gonna, once we collect some of those, we're gonna start reading them out. So if you've got anything that you think would be a cool submission for that, send it in. We just might read your story. With all of that out of the way, mate, I think it's time that we get to our very, very esteemed guest. Now,
But first, the biggest E. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Two Dudes Talk Music family, my friend.
Oh, we got one. Biggest E. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that one. All right, so I got to say, we're really excited for this one. Very, very excited. Because this is, I think, the first guest that we've had on that where they've got a Wikipedia page.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is the first that we've had on that's had their own Wikipedia page, so makes us feel like a bit of a big deal getting that on.
It does.
Anyway, we have with us today the wonderful, the amazing Sam from Caligula's Horse. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. Good to talk to you guys.
Thank you again for jumping on this one. We very, very much appreciate it. We know you must be busy. It's the time of year. Everyone's run off their feet. And especially with you guys just coming off those shows with Butterfly Effect.
Congratulations.
You guys must have a lot of work. Been doing a lot of work lately. So yeah, that was congratulations on getting that tour. That must have been a really, really fun time.
It was a blast. It was awesome.
Did you get to hang out with the Butterfly Effect boys much, or was it a bit more
Yeah.
separate?
I mean, the funny thing is, like, you know, we this sounds like a really lame way to start talking about this, but it's like we haven't sort of done the support slot thing in Australia for some time. And it's pretty common when you do that kind of thing for it to be like, you know, you are kind of relegated to this different position in the touring party. But they were some of the most just welcoming kind of, you know, hang out withable kind of guys that we've really ever toured with, let alone, you know, playing such big venues and you know, such a high profile tour in general. No, it was an absolute blast. It was fantastic.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's really good to hear, because, you know, whenever there's a band you like, you like to believe that they're, you know, that they're good blokes and that they're good people.
Absolutely.
So, and I mean, I look, I have to say, I think part of that as well may have also been from the fact that, you know, like, they're not idiots. They know what's going on in the Australian music scene. They would 100% recognize the, you know, Caligula's Horse is not just some fucking local support act from, you know, from the suburbs. It's like, you guys have been out there grinding, doing shit. You guys have earned all of your success that you've got, and you guys are on a very solid standing. So, I have, you know, they must have recognized that as a factor as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like I think between oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, if they didn't, then, you know, that they're not paying enough attention.
Yeah, no, it's exactly right. So I think it was I think Clint had been a fan of us for some time. I think this is how the story went. And actually the idea of like Thornhill and Caligula's Horse went back some time as like a touring package. So yeah, it was a while in the making. I'm just glad it happened, because I think it was a fantastic lineup.
Well, at the Sydney show, you guys were my wild card. I've heard of Thornhill. I've obviously heard of Butterfly Effect. But when I walked in, you guys had just started, or maybe 2 or 3 songs into your set, and the missus just was captivated straight away. And then I'm like, okay, let's go back, let's watch. And you just grabbed me. The whole sound, everything.
We sold it. The package sold to you.
It was you guys with a nice little bow on the rest of the night for me.
Well, it's funny, like, you could consider that lineup, right? So Thornhill fans are not often Caligula's Horse fans. Caligula's Horse fans usually know Butterfly Effect, but, you know, maybe not vice versa. Like, it was one of those really interesting lineups where a lot of the time, you know, playing with a couple of thousand people a night, we knew that there were a lot of people who had never heard of us, and we kind of saw this on the merch stand when we had, you know, the lineup of people kind of saying,
I waited 25 minutes.
I've heard of you guys. Of course, again, we used to doing our, you know, considerably smaller kind of like club and theater type shows. But it was definitely like a situation where, you know, we were playing to new people, and it seemed to be working. You know, at least we got that impression after each gig. And I guess your anecdote hopefully proves that a little bit, I suppose.
Well, mate, like, yeah, the proof's in the pudding. That lineup was huge at the merch stand. You guys are, and you guys are actually at the merch stand too, selling your merch, and that was such a good thing to see. You guys were so humble and so nice on the night. You were getting photos with everyone. You were signing stuff. And you guys did not disappoint as far as gear, like as far as merchandise to sell. You guys brought records. You guys brought T-shirts.
And promptly sold out of them halfway through the tour. It was pretty brutal, actually.
Wow, like, it was you guys definitely know how to sell your product.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So if you're not aware of Caligula's Horse, it's a progressive rock band, progressive rock, progressive metal, somewhere on that sort of knife's edge. I feel like between
I say it's metal,
rock and metal. Sam here is obviously one of the founding members. I believe it was yourself and Jim were the OGs from back in 2011. Is that right?
Well, I mean,
or
do
does it go back
you want a bit of the backstory? It's
absolutely.
Mate, 100% we do.
So
that's why we're here.
The thing is, so Jim and I knew each other from like ways back. You know, like, I'm talking our late teenage years. We rehearsed in different bands, like down the hall from one another. We knew each other just in passing in that kind of way. Caligula's Horse actually started more or less as like a solo project of mine. So I was kind of writing this music that I'd kind of, like a lot of musicians do, I'd started to kind of butt heads with, you know, the garage band type situations I was in at the time. I just wanted to create some stuff that didn't feel as restricted by some of the settings that I was in. So I started writing this music, and I had this idea in my mind that it was going to be like a different singer on each song. You know, I'd written these songs in their entirety, and I was going to get a bunch of different guest musos in. And I had a couple of people that I'd worked with. Jim was one of the earliest ones. I just asked, "Hey, do you want to sing on a song?" Yeah, sure, why not? Let's give it a try. And that song was "Alone in the World" off Moments from Ephemeral City, which is sort of one of the songs that from that era still holds up a bit. A lot of fans still talk about that tune. But we knew straight away that it was just a kind of cool collaboration. We really enjoyed being in each other's company and, creating that song as we did. So I kind of threw the original idea to the wayside. And basically from there on, we kind of decided the record would all feature Jim. And then as we went on further and further with that, we actually did a little bit of co-writing towards the end of that record. So that record still has the DNA of kind of like a Sam Vallon solo album, so to speak. River's End, our 2013 album, is the first time we wrote everything kind of together, 50-50, as we pretty much are nowadays as well.
Okay, cool. So that's an interesting story. I mean, it seems like the perfect recipe for success, right? Like that's all the bands that do really well. You hear about that. It's almost always people that have, been in each other's orbit for a little while, and then come together just through circumstances and coincidence, and you've got us, and it leads to plans changing, but then that ends up being the best, the strongest outcome. I think.
Yeah, exactly. We had no conceit behind it at all. Like it really was just one of those things where we kind of enjoyed doing the thing together, and then as we did it more, and especially as we started collaborating, we kind of realized only after the fact, like after we released that first record, that we had something special. And I still remember, like it must have been probably mid 2011, maybe 3 or 4 months after the album had come out. We just released it independently. There was no special kind of plans or approaches or kind of mindsets involved. I remember like Jim and I just having a chat and saying, hey, I think we need to put an actual band together. So, you got to understand all of that groundwork happened like prior to, Caligula's actually becoming a live entity and all of that kind of stuff. All of that is fairly unusual, I guess, in the context of a band who since have put thousands of touring miles down. But yeah, at one point we were just, weird solo project that we collaborated on and realized it sounded kind of cool,
And so you, if I understand it correctly, you did like all the mixing and mastering and everything on that. Was it just the first album, or was it the first couple of releases? How was that?
So I've always produced. That's kind of like another small niche of my career. But Moments from Ephemeral City, the 2011 album, it kind of represented one of the first like albums I had made. Like again, I was a late teenager when most of that was written, and kind of in my early 20s as I was putting that together. But that one, yeah. So I mixed and mastered it. River's End, I mixed. Had Dave Collins master it. Bloom, I had Brendan Anthony is a kind of mentor of mine. He mixed it, and then I had Jens Bogren master it. In Contact, Forrester Saville, me, and Caleb James mastered it, and mixed it, and then Jens mastered it, and then In Contact, Jens Bogren mixed and mastered.
Wow.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of like it's one of those things where the production stuff is it's a passion of mine and one of my kind of primary interests, but I've also always loved the idea of treating that part of the process, especially like mixing and stuff, as another element of the collaboration. So it's like Jens Bogren was my biggest hero. When we could afford hiring him to mix, I wanted to see what he would do to one of my productions. You know what I mean? So it ended up being a really exciting thing. But similar motivations drove a lot of the kind of decisions on mixing and mastering once we had a budget,
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, what was that like getting something mixed or produced by a hero? Well, like what?
Man, it was so cool. So like Rise Radiant was an album that in a production sense, I was incredibly proud of sort of what we'd put together in the raw state, and I basically just wanted to see, like, with these building blocks that we've created that I was so confident with. If I get my hero, like the guy who I've, used his mixes as reference points since time immemorial, what would he do with that stuff? And it ended up being this amazing process where one, like creatively, I was very fulfilled, but I was also kind of like temporarily, like, in terms of my analytical mind, like I really loved seeing, what he did to my guitar tracks and my bass tracks, and what did he have issues with, what didn't he have issues with. Of course, as a producer, that tends to be really kind of it's a great learning tool, when you see that happen. And fortunately for us, we were able to kind of keep the aesthetic of that record quite natural, because that's another thing that I think to some degree it probably sets us apart from a lot of progressive metal, where it's kind of hyper triggered, hyper realistic kind of sounds. we tend to go for things that are a little more organic. For various reasons, we can get into that at a different point. But Jens was able to kind of do that with our production and with our performances, and I don't know, it was just an awesome learning experience for that reason. Like, it came together exactly as I envisioned it.
That's awesome.
I mean, I completely understand what you're saying about like trying to keep it a bit natural sounding as well. I mean, I've obviously got a little bit of a setup here, and I actually take one of my recording, production philosophies from there's a guy on YouTube that I follow, and one of his slogans is "Git rats, get it right at the source."
Totally.
And I think it's so invaluable in terms of just because if you get it right at the source, it makes everything easier. You have to use less plugins, less editing, less faffing about in the editing side of things, in the production side and mixing side of things, and it just makes it sound so much smoother at the end of the day. That's definitely something that I picked up when I went to check you guys stuff out. When Kyle was telling me about, you gotta check this band, we gotta get them on the podcast, everything. I was like, immediately went and checked it out, and I can 100% hear what you were talking about there when you were saying, trying not to have that hyper realistic, hyper edited, down to the frame on literally everything. That's because it does. It becomes it becomes almost unreal, overproduced, and a lot of it ends up sounding very much the same, I think.
It's interesting. Like, you consider kind of the genre we exist in. I guess like metal in general nowadays. That hyper-realistic sound is something that I guess most people have come to expect. I'm not convinced that most people would be aware of the difference, right? Like, if they're listening to something, like, they wouldn't be able to say this is the difference tangibly, but I'm sure there's a feel difference that you experience, especially if you kind of listen to an album for a long period of time. It doesn't, maybe it becomes a little less fatiguing, or maybe the detail is a little bit more, you're able to kind of dissect it a little bit more over time. Again, like, I'm not sure, but I sort of get the feeling, at least from my own experience as a music listener, that I kind of enjoy that more. But in saying that, you've still got to you can't really have a 70s sounding album nowadays, especially not in our genre. So, there's always a little bit of a balance there. But no, I really appreciate things feeling like a performance, which I think is definitely a little bit less common. I would hazard to call it rare in our genre nowadays.
That's a really good way to describe it. Like, you're when you listen to it, even on a playback, it feels like a performance. I've never heard it sort of being described like that.
Capturing that live energy is so important these days, especially in the market where, as you say, so much stuff is produced to the nth degree. If you can try and capture a vibe of the performance, people may not necessarily be able to consciously tell you this is what it is, but it's almost an intangible quality to it that the average consumer or the average music listener isn't necessarily they're not going to be able to label it, but they're going to know that there's something different about it, and they're going to feel that.
Absolutely.
Which I think
that's
really
my hope.
Cool.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, and I hear the same from a lot of people that I talk to in the similar sphere. So that's awesome. So, like, okay, so we have mentioned some of the albums here, so let's just run these down for a second. So 2011, you guys had the EP, was it Colossus? And
so we released Ephemeral City in April. I think Colossus came in September, but soon after we kind of packaged those as like there was just a bonus tracks version of the original album, especially once we eventually licensed it a couple of years later and whatnot.
Okay, cool. And then you had The Tide, The Thief, and River's End, which was 2013.
That's right.
Bloom in 2015, and Contact 2017, and then Rise Radiant 2020. And those last three have been on Inside Out Music. Is that like a full label?
So that's a subsidiary of Sony. So it's like, but it's their kind of like prog arm. It's where Dream Theater's signed, Evan Townsend signed. Like it's
that's some good fucking company, man.
That
really is.
Wow.
Wow, there you go.
Fair,
so
my
that's
favorite Devon Townsend is strapping young dad.
Yeah, I mean, but it's kind of a who's who now. Like I remember when we were first kind of doing our negotiations with record labels in 2015, a series of circumstances that led us into a pretty good position when it came to like who do we want to sign with. But at that time, Inside Out had like, I think they'd recently signed like Haken and Leprous. They had Devin Townsend from the very beginning, and like they were significant, but they were also at that point like in the early stages of kind of merging with Sony. And I remember it was a little bit of a point of contention. Like we didn't know what that would mean for us if we signed with them. But it turned out that the label just went from strength to strength. And we've just recently re-signed with them. So, I mean, it's one of these things where like, this is a label that a band like Pain of Salvation have been on Inside Out since like the late 90s. Devin Townsend as well, I suppose. Fantastic label. I have nothing but good things to say about them. And that seems like a pretty rare thing in the music industry. So it's a good
say, do you reckon they come from a bit announced, maybe from your end, and not getting caught out too early and knowing the industry a bit more? Or
well, I mean, the funny thing is, like, even so, like I said, we've just re-signed, which has given us the opportunity to like get better terms across the board. But the funny thing is, like, our terms when we were just a 4-year-old band, 4-year-old band. Signing with them as our first record deal, having had like some licensing deals and stuff prior to that, like even the initial offer they gave us was honestly pretty good. And once we'd negotiated it up, it was honestly fantastic for that circumstance. So like they really never fucked us over at all. They kind of had our back from the very beginning. And the cool thing is that, it just gets better as a band grows. So yeah, I mean, again, long story short, like I have nothing bad to say about that label. Love the boss. Awesome. Thomas is fantastic.
Wow, you're a rare seed.
I know, and this is why I want to say it. It's an interesting situation.
That's really, really cool.
That's
I'm glad
great.
that you've not been having any issues there as well. And I mean, on top of releasing all of those albums, you guys have actually won, what is it, the Heavy Song of the Year from the Queensland Music Awards as well?
Yeah.
Is that right?
I mean, we've had a couple of cool little things like that, as well as little brushes with like one fun one was I got in the top 3 guitarists in the Total Guitar Readers poll in 2015 for my prog guitarist.
I can completely understand that.
John Petrucci and Guthrie Govan, I think. Like there was some really cool things like that we've kind of got to have along the way. Obviously Queensland Music Awards is another great example, but little adolescent dreams that.
When are we getting the signature series?
I think that's still a little while off, but one day.
Mate, I think it's close.
Mate, yeah.
Closer than you think.
You should reach. I reckon you should. Man, you should reach out to Schecter.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've been playing Music Man for some time. You can kind of see some of them hanging out there behind me. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe one day. I'll keep hoping.
Yeah, those Music Mans are a good choice. I picked up a Music Man Stingray bass recently.
Love
myself,
them.
And it's
absolutely love them.
Yeah, I think the way I describe it is, after you've been playing for a while, you kind of reach a point where you accept that okay, no instrument is going to just be like a magical instrument that feels like that makes me feel like I'm playing better, that makes me want to play more, that makes me want to do all this. It's like, and then I picked that one up, and it was like half the weight of a usual 5-string. And everything about it was just so much smoother, and just it had that almost magical element to it. And it's I can see the appeal of them now. I was like, you kind of think, oh, no bass is worth that much money. No
that
bass
amount of money. They're very expensive, yeah.
That sort of thing. I fortunately got a better deal on it than I was expecting to. But yeah, they're a reliable brand for sure, and you know that you're going to be getting quality when you pick up a Music Man. Definitely.
Exactly. Like the issue that I kind of had is like obviously from the very beginning, everything was written on 7 strings in Caligula's, and like I had at the time a really cheap, nasty Ibanez I recorded on. I've got a much nicer Ibanez back there from that similar era, but I remember like having a genuine moment of like pondering, what guitars am I going to play, especially as the band started to take off a little bit. And at that time, it was really hard to get like a 7-string that wasn't a full-blown kind of like metal machine.
Yeah.
You imagine like a big, long kind of scale length, like frets this high. I'm exaggerating, but and like looked really kind of somewhat pointy and whatever else.
Yeah,
so
they were all the Fear Factory ones, the Korn ones.
The Korn ones, yeah.
Exactly.
The K7s.
So I sort of came to the John Petrucci models of Music Man guitars. I remember reaching out to Music Man. They were kind of keen to work with me back then. And it's behind me here, actually. I know this is no good for the...
No, grab it.
That was my first... Yeah, this one.
Just grab it.
This was my first Music Man way back in 2015, and I've customized it quite a lot since. But I mean, this thing has been to like basically every tour we've ever been on. It's covered in dings. You can't see it very well on this camera. But yeah, I mean, like I've taken this thing across like 3 European tours. It's been to the States. It's been to Latin America. It's been all over Australia many times, and it's still rock solid. Love this guitar.
Yeah.
It's still my favorite guitar.
Yeah.
Even though I got some other ones since.
They build them properly. Like they build them out of all the right materials, and they build them really solid. So
The guitars that were made to last.
I'm not surprised it's last year. I mean, anything that's going to come out of the same like it's because it was Les Paul, I think, right? Like Les Paul after he left.
Yeah, it
Or
was
it
Leo
Fender?
Fender.
Fender.
Yeah, so
Sorry.
that, yeah,
I
that was
I knew
one.
it was one or the other one. One of them or the other one.
Les Paul or Fender.
Yeah, so well, I mean, this is a really interesting guitar because compared to like say, I've got like a Music Man Cutlass back behind me, that white blue guitar, which is a bit more of a Strat style guitar. Like this is, it's a 25.5-inch scale, but it has like an Ibanez style. I think it's like a 16-inch radius, like a really flat kind of neck, like a D-shaped kind of flat neck. And that's pretty unique for Music Man. Like no other guitars in the Music Man line are really like that. None of the signature models, none of the kind of conventional models. And I didn't even really know that at the time. Like I kind of assumed a lot of them were in that more Ibanez-y kind of build like this is. But it really is like an amazing marriage of that sort of Ibanez sleekness, like the speed and the kind of playability that really like with the Gem and then the RG they kind of put on the map. But mixed with something that is again a little more kind of classy and refined.
The white tones it down so much, like and that curved headstock is because normally when you see
especially on a 7-string.
I think it was Josh Smith just released his Jackson signature series, and he's got the nice curved. Looks amazing.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I mean that's my main guitar, and kind of flirted with some other things. I took an Aristides guitar on tour for the Butterfly Effect tour, and had some fun with that. It's an amazing instrument as well. But yeah, the Music Man relationship I've now had for 7 years, and yeah, still love them.
Mate, if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
And I think that it's definitely time then. If anyone from Music Man's watching, get on it. Give this man a
signature series. Jeez.
By the way, if anyone out there in the chat has any questions, if you guys want to jump in, you got any questions about gear or anything, any questions for Sam, throw them in the chat. We'd love to pass those on and get those answered. I did actually have a friend of mine when he mentioned that we were having you on. He wanted to ask about the tones, your guitar tones that you use. I think he just wants to know sort of what your
my approach to patch building and stuff is.
Yeah.
So for a while I play. Well, I'm old enough that I sort of came up with valve amps and stuff like that, and I was a reasonably early adopter of like Axe FXs, fractal Axe FXs, and kind of loved that technology. But in recent years, over the last about 3 years, I've been endorsing Neural DSP. We're a company that they've kind of become fairly synonymous now with progressive metal, since many people have kind of jumped ship from some of the previous technology to this. So I use a Neural DSP Quad Cortex for all of my touring. When it comes to recording and production stuff, I use a lot of the plugins as well, especially the Fort and Cali. That's sort of my go-to, especially for lead sounds. But in terms of building my patches, because I mean, all this information is generic. Like you could transfer this to a Kemper or an Axe FX, or even a rig if you've got infinite money. But so basically, my main rhythm patch, I tend to use like a Friedman BE model, like their brown eye model. That's what that stands for. You understand why they stopped using that as the selling point for a little while. So that's sort of my go-to. It's kind of like a hot rodded Marshall type sound, a little bit tighter, a little bit more gain. I use like Mesa oversized type cab IRs. My favorite ones are the ML Audio ones. Their mega oversize is just phenomenal. I absolutely love it. In terms of lead sounds, I tend to still use the BE. It's one of my go-tos. Sometimes I'll use like a 5150 type model if I want something a bit gooier. Every metal guy knows how the 650s are. Anyone who doubts it is a fool. And in terms of clean stuff, I tend to use just like kind of Fender style cleans. And this is a funny thing. I've jumped all over the place for cleans over the years, like Bogner Shiva and like other amps that are kind of like early Mesa Mark series stuff. which are really nice for cleans. But lately I've loved twins, and I've loved, especially if I'm using them on like a modeler, you're using like a 1x10, 1x12, or a 2x12, and mucking around with that cab depending on exactly where you want it to kind of sit in the mix. So that's the basic idea. I'll use like a tube screamer or something to tighten it up for the chuggy stuff. What else? I think that's kind of most of the things. In saying that, I mean, if you saw my signal chains, they're quite disgusting, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you're hearing. Is the stuff I described.
Yeah. No, look, and there's some classic choices in there, definitely. I mean, a Fender Twin is just, they're a classic for a reason. And
exactly.
Ditto on the tube screamer as well. Like those tube screamers are just some of the most reliable pedals. You know what you're gonna get, but they're still extremely versatile as well. I mean, I've been using with this band I've had in the studio. I think I was even just using the tube screamer for like a clean boost as well ahead of a couple of other things.
Just a bit of a like high pass filter and a clean boost, and
it just adds a nice bit of flavor onto it and just really strengthens that, makes that really nice hot signal without and then just tidies up the tones a little bit on it as well, I think.
Yeah, that's it. Like when I'm using it, it tends to be like drivers on 0 or 1, and it tends to just be kind of like a level push. And lately I've been kind of experimenting with more like EQ on the way in as well. You can kind of push some frequencies that maybe. So I mean, in these, as an example, in this guitar, I'm using Rabia's silo pickups, bare knuckle pickups. I've worked with bare knuckle for a couple of years now as well, and they're amazing, but they're very, very smooth. It's kind of what I love. So sometimes you want that rhythm to be a bit gnarlier. Push up your kind of 1.5, 2K, like some of those really kind of harsh upper mid-range, well, middle mid-range kind of frequencies. Prior to it, like a tube screamer and any other drive pedal you use obviously has especially like a mid-range characteristic that's quite unique to it. But yeah, that can be kind of a cool way of getting a little more flavor out of it as well. And on a modeler, it's very achievable, whereas live, that can be a bit of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, the secret sauce, you know what I mean? Like sometimes that's what I call it. Sometimes you just add a little thing in there and it just does. It's imperceptible to most people, but by the time you get to the end of the chain, it makes so much difference. So
once you've done 20 of those like little things, right?
Exactly. And then you kind of come up with your secret sauce. So do you guys run cabs on stage, or are you straight into the desk with?
I'll tell you a story about this.
Because this is my question.
One of the first big like national tours we did in Australia, and this would be off the top of my head like 2016 or somewhere around there. We did direct support for Opeth. Like we were the only support band. They were like at the time, and still probably my all-time favorite band. I reckon, at least up there, definitely top 3.
With good reason.
Yeah, I adore them. But I remember that tour was one of these ones where we had, I think, something like 15 minutes to like clear the stage and their line checking. It was a really tight turnaround. And it was the first time that, like, looking at that line, looking at the line list, the run sheet, all of that kind of stuff, I remember saying to our sound guy, like, can we try on this tour, given we're flying everywhere, can we try not using cabs? I was terrified at the time, the idea of it. But that was the motivation. Like, it was literally just realizing that, doing the big cab lug off thing, as well as all of the other problems. I mean, anyone who's toured knows just how variable a cab can be when you're hiring, a version of it in each city. I also had we did a tour with Tesseract like maybe a year before that. Where
that been dropped in ages.
Yeah, where the Melbourne show, my amp blew up as we walked on stage. Like, I literally walked on stage, chucked it off standby, like, did a quick kind of line check, and it just went. Then, fortunately, I had a backup, but that was kind of the motivation leading into the Opeth tour, to be like, we need to find another way, So that resulted in me kind of trying it. Then that was before I was even using IEMs or anything, and it's pretty tricky without IEMs, but. I basically never looked back again. It saves so much hassle, so much work. The sound is the same each night, which is pretty incredible too, as long as you're quite happy with where it's at. And since then, we've gone to a pretty elaborate like IEM rig. We do like our own monitors and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyway, that's a bit of an anecdote as to how I ended up not using cabs. But yeah, nowadays it's literally Dale and I run a quad Cortex which sits at our rack, MIDI switching done for us, like via Ableton. I don't have anything in front of me on stage, like literally nothing. My wireless
So
talks
all your patches are changed. All your patches are changed in the programming, and it just
all that happens in the computer. It's all fake. Everything is fake. But you know what? It was one of these things that like
not fake,
Not the
digital.
playing.
I'm gonna call it fake. It's because it's hilarious to me. Like I still find it funny sitting on stage playing, and you know my lead tone comes in right as I go to the solo. It's amazing. But it was one of those things where that was kind of the final step towards the really, really kind of like what's the word, like automating a lot of our setup. So our rack is like a series of cables that I've designed to it sets up in 15 minutes and it does everything. We just have to go up there and play perfectly. That's all.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Kyle and I have this is a point of contention between Kyle and I. He's very much like, no, you need the rumble. You need the force of cabs on stage.
I do,
and I get it. I
can't get rumble from in-ears.
But
oh no, man, it is like it is nasty, and I'm going to say this because like I feel like it's one of these things people don't like to say, but it took me ages to feel comfortable playing in in-ear monitors, especially in like a rehearsal environment where you don't necessarily have like a front of house going, because that can be, it's just not really necessary if you're running everything like this, and especially things like. So if you're using IEMs, you don't get the benefit of having some kind of like feedback response from like your pickup and a speaker. Certainly like what a guitar feels like to play is really affected by that. So I remember like in the early days, I found it pretty hard to kind of like connect to a performance. It took like genuine effort for that to be something that didn't really affect me anymore. But this is all just to say, Kyle, like I totally agree. I miss that rumble. It's amazing when you're playing at a big venue or something like that, and you get a little bit of interaction with like the front of house, or the room is just so loud and rumbling, the stage is moving. It's kind of fine, but yeah, I mean, the rehearsal room or in a small venue, yeah, definitely.
Oh.
Yeah, there's advantages and disadvantages to everything, obviously. But I mean, I kind of feel, for me, I just look at it and I'm like, look, the less pieces in the chain, the less that can go wrong.
Exactly right.
The less pieces in the chain, the more control you have over all the different stuff. And as you've said, like
15-minute turnarounds.
You guys are touring, internationally, right? And you're right. Like when you're hiring equipment, you don't know what you're gonna get. You don't know if it's gonna be beat to shit and hardly working, or if it's going to be pristine and brand new. You just
it's even going to give your valve amp enough load to not blow up. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Like you just don't know what you're going to be getting. So the more control you can have over that, the better. I mean, I'm very much with my bass rig, for example. Like I try and have the sound all on my side of the amp. So like all in my pedal board, I try to keep all my sound in there. So that realistically, and I think I've got it dialed, so whatever amp I play through, it still kind of sounds like me, even if the different amps sound a bit different. So I'm very much in that philosophy of it, and I'm getting mighty sick of lugging a bass amp around everywhere, I can tell you. But I think a lot of sound guys, especially at smaller venues, are still not quite at the point of being okay with bass just going straight into the desk.
Really?
Still want a bass amp.
City's all about it. City's all about that stuff, man. Like they just plug into a DI. Get your bassist, plug them into DI. Just only the bassist, DI.
Yeah.
So yeah, Dale had he knocked something loose in his quad Cortex before. I can't remember. No, it was the Cairns show. It was like the first show in the Butterfly Effect tour. Actually, no, hold on. I'm totally mistelling the story. That happened a couple of months prior. He actually lost his quad Cortex on the plane. Got it back after this leg of the tour. Sorry, I'm confusing the two instances where Dale has had a major problem with his quad Cortex. But anyway, the moral of the story is that he, at the first show of the tour in this huge venue, had to go DI, and he sort of dealt with it. It was fine. We've got an amazing sound guy, Matt Cook, who just kicks ass no matter what you give him.
That really helps too. Once you got a good sound guy, never let him go.
Exactly.
Never let him go.
You can do bass DI. It's not optimum though, I guess. But you got to do what you got to do. Right?
I've been to many shows at the Roundhouse, and I will say that Butterfly Effect show was the best sound I've ever heard there. No,
I'll relay
Mate,
that to Matt. He'll be stoked.
mate. I'm dead serious. That everything about that show, I had earplugs in because I'm trying to look after my ears now, and it still sounded choice, like just on point.
Awesome. No, that's great to know, because of course we don't know. You know, we trust Matt, we trust all the guys we work with in different countries and stuff. But that's great feedback.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I don't play anymore. So being at the front of the shows, I don't know what you guys are feeling up there, or I'm getting the feeling. So you're doing the right thing.
Well, and that's it. A show like that, because obviously the PA is huge and the room is amazing. Acoustics are just fantastic. You know, our IEMs are giving us that direct signal, which is enough to kind of monitor off and follow all of our parts and make sure we don't fuck up. But then you actually get some energy in a space like that as well. So I don't use molds. I just use like conventional IEMs. I've always kind of hated the feeling of molds. They're very kind of claustrophobic to me. I find I lose the seal pretty easily if I kind of, you know, open my mouth too much.
Yeah, so cut you off a lot from the outside too.
Exactly. So I sort of stopped using those pretty early on. Like, actually, I've never used them for this particular IEM rig we've got. I just use, like, you know, sort of 535, like, you know, mid-range kind of Shure ones that is enough that it blocks out enough sound to monitor off, but not so much that you don't get any of the kind of ambient atmosphere. And
you want to hear the crowd. You want to hear the crowd. You want to hear everyone going off after that.
That makes me very sad. It's a really important part of, you know, getting to the feel of the show.
That's why we do it, right? That's why we do it. We want to hear that. We want to hear that feedback. We need that validation, right? We need that. To stave off the existential dread.
That's it. We're broken metalheads. Come on, give us validation.
So let's talk a little bit about the name, the band name, right? Was it you that came up with that?
It's okay. So the background. And I'm sorry. I know I throw like the questions immediately to some contextual tangent, but basically,
no, that's great. Look, when you're doing that, it keeps it rolling, and it's really, really good. That's what we got you here.
Yeah, man, we love it.
Well, the song Calliope's Son, that song instrumental, should I say, Calliope's Son off of Moments, was actually originally called Caligula's Horse. That was my kind of working title for it. And as I said, there was no conceit of this becoming a band, right? Like this kind of just happened through circumstance. So basically, like when Jim and I started pushing towards like, hey, we should probably make this into a real project, we needed a band name, and we both liked that. We're both kind of history nerds, and, you know, we both kind of got into it. So it seemed good to appropriate that instead for the band name, and then we renamed the song. But yeah, in terms of the band name, for those who aren't aware, it's probably most people, Caligula is like kind of classically seen as this like despotic kind of emperor. Like there's a lot of famous stories about him, most of which, by the way, are almost certainly apocryphal. Like they're kind of the propaganda of the time almost. But, you know, long story short, he allegedly wanted to make his horse into a consul, like a you know, it's like a senator, like a councilman. And that was kind of seen as one part of his greater like excess. He was, you know, this kind of libertine character, used to do a lot of much more depraved things as well, which are kind of fun to read about if you feel like poring over some, again, probably propagandized history. But basically, we kind of just like the idea of this term that, one, the story is quite interesting, quite fun, but it also has a couple of sort of like, I guess, colloquial kind of like meanings. Like Caligula's Horse is shorthand for a fraud or a phony. We thought it was kind of funny, like, you know, being this kind of quite technically fronted kind of progressive metal band. We thought that it was ironic, I suppose. And yeah, it was just one of those things that we liked the sound of it, we liked what it meant, and we were also pretty sure, like we were chatting about before we started today, like it's not a band name that anyone else has. So we went with it. And, you know, we do run into issues every now and again where people either can't remember the name, can't say the name, or something
mispronounce
like that.
it.
I mean,
yep.
I mean, it is what it is, you know. But I still like it. It's a cool band name.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It definitely kind of sticks in the mind because you're like, it's an interesting name. It's the kind of thing. It's like, you know, some bands you see them and part of their gimmick on stage is it kind of sticks in your head and that's how you remember them. And some bands, it's I mean, obviously the music's essential as well there, but you've been doing this long enough, you completely recognize that you know, sometimes for a lot of bands, because, you know, I'm sure you played with so many bands that are extremely talented bands, but that's not always enough to stand out. That's not always enough to stick in people's minds.
definitely.
the way that's necessary. And for some bands, they can be really exceptional, like you guys, and that's part of the way you do it. But I'm sure that the name helps as well, because as we said, it's a unique name, it's an interesting name. It's kind of like oh, that's funny. Like it's a bit. They even though if they don't fully understand the meaning or the name, the all that behind it, it's unique enough that it makes you go, huh, okay.
And Google sorts it out for you when you
Sure,
start typing
okay.
it in.
Yeah.
Google autofills it for you, and then when you put in the horse bit, you guys just take up all the real estate on that first page of Google. There's nothing else. There's nothing else.
It's cool. It's really cool
else.
because at some point that certainly wasn't true. I mean, there's a lot of like historical articles and stuff. I mean, sometimes I wonder if we've found the success that we have like in spite of the name, but I don't know. At the end of the day, like I still like it. I still think it's got a ring to it.
No, it's very, very cool. I mean, funny story for you. I don't know about you, but I name all of my guitars and basses.
I don't.
I
I'm really
name them
bad for
all.
not.
I'm one of those. No, look, it's not everyone does it. Not everyone does it, but I tend to do that, and most of them I tend to give women's names to.
Yeah.
I tend to give them female names.
You don't want to be playing with a guy now, do you, Raf?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not saying I don't swing both ways, but like, I mean, I generally don't want to be like fingering a dude when I'm.
No, that's it.
Playing, right?
That's it.
But I got a Schecter Demon 7 a little while ago, and prior to hearing about you guys, I was trying to come up with names for it, and someone suggested the name Caligula for it, and I was like, something about it just kind of fit, like this.
It's such a metal name, hey.
It is. It's really, really cool, and it just something about it stuck with me for that, and that's like, so yeah, that's like the name of my 7-string there is
that's
Caligula,
cool.
which I
That's
thought
really
was just,
cool.
and it just sticks. Like and that one, yeah, actually, that Schecter Demon 7 is it's a beast of a guitar. I think it's solid.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, so we talked about some of the history. We've talked about some of the tours and stuff. Is there anything that you guys have in the works that you can kind of tell us a little bit about at the moment, or is it just kind of all quiet on that front, or you're just trying to keep everything secret?
Press him.
No, look, I mean, we've okay. So I'll be as vague as I can kind of be without I guess giving up the game. But no, we are working on the next record now. So basically, we released our last album like right at the cusp of the pandemic. So we were in the very end of the production for that record, like the very end, like kind of getting the masters back and all that stuff. That literally coincided with hearing about like I'm talking like early 2020, like hearing about kind of forecasts of how bad the pandemic's going to be, blah blah blah. We had like a 5-week US tour booked and selling at that time. We had all of this happening. We basically we couldn't have timed it worse, really, like in terms of being able to do the stuff we do with an album, go on the road and all of that. That's not a woe is me, it just kind of is what it is. But the thing is, like, that being the case, we did find it pretty hard for various reasons. Like, this is just one amongst many. Kind of hard to like leave that behind and say it's time to start the next chapter. This album just doesn't get to be an album that we experience on the road and whatever else. So we took longer to really kind of start writing in earnest than we would otherwise. Again, partially for that reason, partially for various other like kind of extrinsic reasons. But basically, we've been writing now for probably like in earnest for maybe 6 months. We're a good chunk of the way through the writing. We're going to start tracking early next year. In terms of like release dates, I'm not going to put anything down yet, but suffice to say that it does take a while for record label to turn around the album once we give them the masters and whatnot. But we're a good chunk of the way through. And in terms of the material, it's pretty sad. It's pretty dark. It's kind of a reflection, I guess, of like the effort of kind of like being in a band through a period where that band is effectively on stasis, and all of the things you've worked for are in the best case paused, and in the worst case entirely thrown into the surface of the sun. So that's kind of, I mean, I guess that's probably about as much as I can say at this point, but we're stoked with it. We think it's going to be incredible once it's all together. Just a little bit more to go first.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear, because I was going to say, it's been, You guys have been pretty quick on those recording and release cycles over the years.
We
I mean,
were, and you know what's interesting? Like, I mean, Rise Radiant at the time was actually the longest period between records. It was like 2.5 years or something like that. I had from the very early days of this band this kind of concept in my mind that, like modeled on bands like the Beatles, where you'd have an album every 6 months and it would reinvent music. It's like, why do bands take 4 years to release an album? You know, it used to be like a chip on my shoulder. So we intentionally made it so we would have a cycle of, you know, like a year or so that we were doing all of the things, all the tours, all of the, you know, all the press, all that stuff, and then we'd immediately start writing again. Like, we just wouldn't let the momentum drop, or at least that was kind of the intention. Rise Radiant took a little bit longer just because we were touring so much. It became quite hard to kind of keep that train rolling. But I mean, still, I think it was okay, all things considered. This is obviously going to be the longest between albums, but funnily enough, like, not by too much, I think. Even if it does end up being 2024, depending on like delivery or whatever. Still, you know, pandemic. I don't know. Is there a pandemic excuse? The pandemic clause?
I think
No, there is.
There is.
It was a make or break moment for a lot of bands. Like,
it
you're
fucked
one
up
of the ones that
everyone.
walked out the other side still, and it's still.
Yeah.
You guys walked out the other side, even though you guys really haven't released anything in 2 years. You've jumped on a national tour with an absolutely amazing band. So, I mean, the numbers that you guys have on Spotify, because I love numbers when they come on stuff like that. I know it's only Spotify and it's a streaming service and it's not cool, but numbers are there regardless. You got 75, nearly 75,000 active listeners every month.
A lot since the last record, but you know, it's been, well, bordering on 3 years now, I suppose. Well, 2.5 years, I suppose.
But still to have that
Yeah.
rep after realistically not doing, sort of staying quiet in the 2 year period, and then coming out and then having those people at the merch stands, you know, like it's testament to the music, the quality of the music that you guys produce.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the really essential things. I think it's, at the end of the day, for most fans, I think it's about how does the music make them feel. It's not about the lyrics specifically. It's not about the chords or the melodies specifically. It ultimately comes down to how does the music make them feel? How does it connect with them emotionally? And, you know, for you guys to have had the success you've had and continue that on, I think is an absolute testament to the fact that despite it being progressive music, because that's something else. I mean, progressive music, a lot of the time people can struggle to connect with it on an emotional level because it's too precise, because it kind of gets into almost gets overcomplicated, and there's merit in that in its own way. But the fact that you guys are doing prog metal that also emotionally connects with people in that way, I think it's just, you're nailing that fine balance, and you know, that's just an absolute testament and a credit to you guys as musicians and as performers, you know, 100%. So
Thank you. Yeah.
What I think we're going to do is we're just going to take a real quick break. We're going to run an ad break here. You know, we'll just refill our drinks, nip off to the loo, whatever we need to do. And then when we come back, we'll dive into the quick question quarter.
Let's do it. Oh, I'll hit the BR back screen. I've got the BR back screen. Let's go, and I'll mute everyone.
All right. No worries. Cheers.
There it is. Hello.
Hello. How are we doing? We are back. So, as promised, it's time for the quick question quarter. Kyle, do you want to hit the thing?
Let's do it. It's going to work tonight.
See if it's going to work.
Getting to know all about you. Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. All right. So,
How long have I got? How quick is this? What are we talking about?
So, well, it's basically, you know, fastest thought first, basically. We don't, I mean, look, we can get into discussing things a little more, but generally the idea behind this is rapid fire questions, starting out easy and getting a little bit more challenging as we move on. So they're not there. So yeah, we'll start easy, and then by the end of it, you kind of have to stop and think about them for a little bit. But anyway, let's go. What was the first instrument that you ever played?
Drums.
Drums.
Oh.
So many people say drums.
So my dad bought me a drum kit when I was, I'm going to say like 6 or 7 or something like that. And that was kind of the only instrument I had until my early teen years. Decided to take up guitar, and the rest is fairly unknown, obscure history.
All right. What was the first album that you ever got, that you purchased?
It was one of those Beatles red and blue compilations. I forget what they were called, but it was basically like a certain set of years and another certain set of years. I had the one that had like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds and all of that kind of like Sergeant Pepper's era stuff. Still love it. It's great.
Yeah, I mean that's a
solid.
I mean, pretty
one.
much any Beatles is good stuff, but that especially was starting to get a bit more experimental, I think, right?
Totally.
All right, what was the first live concert that you attended?
I think it was a Crowded House concert. I think it was Crowded House at the Bowl of Brooklyn, New Plymouth, I believe. I may be misremembering some of those details, but I remember watching it and loving it, and I still adore Neil Finn and Crowded House in general.
Okay, that must have been pretty cool. Do you remember who the support acts were or anything?
I remember nothing. So I was a little kid at the time. I mean, it's one of
okay.
these things that probably like sowed a seed more than anything else. you know?
Right, okay. So it was one where you kind of got your parents kind of dragged you along to it.
The first gig I remember like wanting to go to was it was the big day out. It was like 98 or 99. It was when Limp Bizkit were headlining, and I remember Limp Bizkit got upstaged so hard by Rammstein that little me didn't understand what was going on. The only band I cared about, they got smashed, but it was still awesome. I had the best time.
Nice. What's an instrument you've always wanted to learn but haven't had the opportunity to? Or haven't got around to?
So I'm gonna say piano. Like I can badly play piano.
So many people say
I
that.
do a little bit, but I adore piano, and I wish I was good at it. And one day when I do have a little bit more time, I'm gonna become good at it because I think it's the greatest of instruments in a lot of ways.
I mean, my other than some dabbling on my dad's acoustic guitar, piano was the first instrument I properly learned, and I had like 5 years on it. And mind you, I haven't touched a piano properly in like 20 years now. But even that 5 years of, just learning the theory as well around all of it, it's so valuable, I think, to any musician. It really it expands the scope of your understanding of music, I think.
Definitely.
Because you've got such a range in it, because it's, bass and melody all together and rhythm and all of that in the one thing. So it's a very, very valuable instrument to learn for sure. All right, here we go. I really like this question. If you could pick one big band or artist to open a show for, now this is living or dead, active or not, any point in their career, if you could pick one big band or artist to open a show for that you haven't already, who would it be?
The funny thing is, there's a lot of heroes of mine that I don't think that would be particularly interesting doing. So I'm going to actually go with one that's it's kind of boring. They're not even, a band that I've been an enormous fan of in recent years, but I would love to open for Dream Theater, and I hope one day we can do that. I can get way more obscure, but that's kind of our bucket list we've gradually ticked off over the years, and that remains. So one day hopefully
you'll get there. You'll get there.
If I can be frank, I feel like you guys would show them up. Look, man,
they're pretty good live.
You guys are even better.
I've seen plenty of live clips of Dream Theater, and they kind of just stand there. I feel like you guys have put on a much more entertaining show.
You do.
And look, let's be real. Like, they really haven't been that good since they changed drummers.
Well, that's it. I mean, they were a huge influence of mine in the early days. I just haven't listened to them as much in recent years, and it's probably somewhat for that reason. But
look, I say they haven't been that good since they changed drummers. Obviously, they're incredibly more talented and far more talented than I'll ever be. But just on a musical level, I haven't enjoyed them as much since that change.
I haven't really dug into it as much. That said, every time a new album comes out, I dig into it and and enjoy it. But yeah, there was a period when they were one of the biggest kind of influences on me. Like a lot of prog guitar players, like they were kind of foundational.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, who is a band or artist that you're listening to at the moment that you believe is underrated and deserves more attention?
I'm gonna say Niels Frahm. He's a sort of minimalist kind of pianist. Delves into some electronic music and stuff as well, but largely seen as a composer. And I say underrated. I mean, he's quite big, especially in that world. But I get the sense, especially in the genre circles that I kind of exist in, that music of that ilk maybe is ignored by a lot of people because it does tend to be fairly quiet and fairly, kind of like what's the word I'm looking for here? kind of rustic in its way. You know, you kind of enjoy the space that it's recorded and all of this kind of stuff as much as the music itself sometimes. But yeah, highly recommended just in general.
Awesome. What is something that people may be surprised to learn about you?
I think a lot of our fans know, but so I've got a doctorate in music, and I'm an academic in my day job life.
And I wish we'd known that. We could have put your proper title in front of the name on the thing. We could have introduced, you know. I
use that as an example because the funny thing is, like, I see my music academic life and my kind of like night job, as it were, as a musician, is kind of really they share very little relation. Those two careers, or those two, you know, kind of jobs. So yeah, you know, I'm sure a lot of people don't know that about me, but it's kind of funny. It's kind of silly.
A lot of academics make really good musicians.
No, you need to be in, when Jim's going around doing the introductions and naming everyone in the band. He needs to call you Dr. Sam. That's what has to happen now. It just has to.
There's like every form you fill out has doctor as an option, and let me tell you something. I have never ticked that option.
Why?
What do you do? What's the point?
Yeah,
that's the only reason.
That's true. Maybe you only spend those 4.5 years doing it just for the tick box, right?
Yeah.
The only reason you do it, mate. Like, look, I'll give you an example, right? I'm a reverend in Universal Life Church, right? It's one of those online things you can go. Literally anyone can become a reverend in it, but legally it's valid. Legally it's valid. So I can put every opportunity I get to put reverend in there. I put reverend in there.
Nice.
We got
our first chat
from Ellie. I'm not sure. Sam, best teacher.
Oh, Eli Saba, he's a guitar student of mine. He's an absolute monster.
Oh, really?
Oh, Eli,
your chops are outrageous.
Eli, you in a band?
No, from the write-up that I gave you for your assessment only a couple of months ago.
Eli, are you in a band? If you're in a band, let us
know.
up.
Hit us up, man.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get you on, and we want to listen to your stuff, Eli. We want to hear it.
Yeah, man.
Okay. Next question. Now, this is where we start to get to the real end of this stuff, and I love it. Okay. What is the cringiest band name or song name that you've ever been involved with?
Oh man, I didn't even have to think about this one because I got an awesome one. Now, it's cringy, but like it's kind of awesome too. Named after a Cradle of Filth song. Wargasm. It was my first like extreme metal band. I still kind of stand by it, but I mean, you can see there was no hesitation for that answer. That's the correct answer.
No, I love that. That's brilliant. Oh, Eli's saying no.
No. I'm saying you're not in a band, or you're not going to come on.
When it happens, when you got a band going, or when you got some music, you want to straight out hit us up. We definitely want to get you on to talk.
Yeah, wait till you
want to get on to talk. If you're getting taught by Sam, you got to be fucking good. You're gonna be good. All right, last question for this one, and this is my favorite question, I think.
Oh no.
What is your most controversial musical opinion?
Love this one.
Oh, that is a good question. Oh man, I see. The thing is, I know I've got a couple of them here.
If you want to name a few.
Okay,
you can rattle off more than one if you want.
Okay, I'm gonna. So the thing is, again, there's probably a couple I could hazard, like I could throw something together for, but I reckon the one that probably would get me in the most trouble, at least with kind of my fan base, is
this is good.
Progressive rock stopped being progressive in the early 1970s.
Ooh.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing is, I wrote my doctorate on that. Like, it's one of these things that I really got kind of deeply invested.
So if anyone knows, it's you. If anyone's going to qualify to give a fucking opinion on that,
no, but see, here's the thing.
Please
that includes my band. I mean, like, progressive just sort of stopped meaning what it meant and started meaning something different, which is this kind of genre marker that it is now. And that's totally fine, of course. So this isn't a judgment of quality, but it's just to say, like, kind of, it stopped meaning that it was actively progressing what rock was doing.
Yeah.
At some point, maybe 1970, 1971, in my opinion.
Look, I 100% get where you're coming from with that. I mean, it blows. Yeah, I mean, the 70s are probably earlier than what I would think with that, but I mean, you're the doctor on it. You know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I ain't gonna argue.
I mean, honestly, the late 1960s, the thing is, it goes under the radar, but and not to get bogged down with too much of the kind of boring, like, I guess like music history stuff, but like 1967, 68, 69, that era is like an actual renaissance moment in rock, and it's kind of forgotten for that. I mean, people know Sgt. Pepper's, they know In the Court of the Crimson King, but it was honestly like overnight, what rock music meant. I mean, literally, the term rock came in to be used in about 1967. But like what popular music could be, like an expressive medium, it happened over the course of like really just a few years. So when I say that, again, not a judgment of quality, just an observation on just how cool what happened before that actually was.
In terms of a stylistic label is what you're talking about. Like, I mean, that's kind of like me, right? Like I maintain, I will die on this hill, that nu metal doesn't describe a genre. Nu metal describes a period.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair.
Because
I mean,
you
there's
look at all
definitely some
bands that were
genre
labeled.
markers you can put together for it, though. But yeah,
You look at all some of the biggest bands that were labeled as nu metal. You've got, you know, Manson, Korn, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot, Disturbed, and okay, yeah, they're metal factors in all of them, but they're all vastly different sounding bands.
Yeah,
And
totally.
they
Even
do
Drowning
not, they do
Pool.
not sound like Drowning Pool, Deftones. You look at like these bands. They all really sound like they're different genres.
Yeah.
More than so. I maintain it describes a time period more than nowadays. Yeah, you can say like like a new metal, like the new metal renaissance or whatever, the revival that's happening at the moment. And yeah, it all kind of sounds like, you know, like a bit of Korn, a bit of Limp Bizkit, Linkin Park, a bit of whatever, you know, thrown together. But
yeah, it was pretty
sometimes
distinctive when it happened. That's for sure.
But that's it. It was more just an explosion of alternative metal rather than its own genre. Realistically, is kind of how I see that one. So,
I can see that.
all right. Lovely. I tell you what, man. I feel like we definitely at some point need to get you back on to delve into some of this these history lessons.
Yeah, man. If we got a doc, we know a doctor on music. No, dude, you have no man.
Absolutely.
And you know what? I don't really care if anyone listens. I'm here to learn as well. As much as I'm here to podcast, I'm here to learn.
That'd be good. I think that's definitely something. All right, Kyle, if you're ready, I think it's time for our next segment, my favorite segment of the podcast.
This is great.
Time for the fuck off files.
Let's fuck them off. Let's fuck them off.
Oh no.
Yeah.
We're back.
We're back. All right. So, if you haven't watched the podcast before, maybe you're like Eli, you haven't watched the podcast before, you're tuning in for the first time.
You should like and subscribe, Eli.
I don't know how old Eli is, so I haven't
seen your
saying fuck off files, but anyway, basically what we do is we think we talk to our esteemed guests and we say if there was any 3 things that you could just snap your fingers and Thanos them out of existence from the music industry, what would they be? This can cover any territory. This can cover anything from the fan side, the consumer side, to the business side, to the touring side, recording side, venue side. Literally any aspects involved.
He's on a record label he likes. He likes his boss.
We're probably not going to ditch the label, but yeah, like if you've got a few things, what are they and why? What's your first one, and why? What's the first thing you'd fuck off?
The thing is, I can actually think of a couple of things that I have no kind of hesitation in saying like they need to change, but they are like the things I'm going to kind of list here. I've got 2. Hopefully another one comes to me, but the first one is just large ticketing companies, Ticketek. These things are absolute blights on the world of kind of live music production. I don't think it really needs much extrapolation at this point. I mean, considering especially like some of the kind of controversies you've heard about recently and like lawsuits and stuff in the US. I'll leave that one pretty simple. Like I think in terms of selling tickets to people, there are much more elegant and much more kind of like, not to sound like too much of a bleeding heart lefty, but kind of more socialistic ways to do it, where it's like you're just selling music to fans. That's really what it's about.
When you've got the ticketing companies owning, you know, the same sort of overall arching corporations own the ticketing company, the chain of venues.
Yeah, it's a proper monopoly, and that's kind of that's a large part of the problem.
And if you don't go through Ticketek, then you can't play at those venues. And what are you going to do?
Exactly.
It is.
So again, happily put those chips in. And again, it's probably not a very controversial one. But
no, people don't understand. Like we all like come obviously from the punter side or whatever. People don't understand that when you buy that ticket, when you're paying that 50, 20, 10, whatever dollars, mate, a good chunk of that goes to Ticketek.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't go to the band. It doesn't go to the people that are lugging all the gear out there.
And that's the thing about
surcharge upon surcharge.
They don't have the fuck off files. Isn't about being controversial. This is just about, in your view, what needs to fuck off, right?
Yeah.
Like we've had some, you know, we've had a lot of people come on and say similar things because I think a lot of musicians agree that the same things are wrong with the industry, But then we do okay, every so often we do get someone come on and say something stupid. Like we had a guy come on and say, "Oh, he would fuck off slap bass," and I'm like, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
Saying that to the bassist, no less.
Well, I wasn't on that one. I wasn't on that episode because I was away. But these
Probably how he got away with it.
because I would have fucked him off out of the thing right then.
No,
and
you
there,
got hang up.
Yeah.
I mean, that one's pretty tangible. The next one's a little bit more, I guess, kind of metaphysical. But I would fuck off the rivalry that a lot of bands feel, especially in like national circuit scenes. There tends to be, well, first of all, I'm a big believer in that kind of adage of like the rising tide lifting all ships, right? The idea that if we are all kind of happily playing our part, getting along and supporting one another, that tends to be good to foster the scene in general. And it tends to make it so the music scene is stronger, more robust, able to kind of, deal with more, especially you see like a, global pandemic, the hazard that is kind of wrought on global music. So I think in general, bands need to be less kind of myopic about their own success at the expense of others, like throwing others under the bus or, doing their best to kind of exclude bands or, even exclude themselves from certain scenes and things, for example. But I think, in Australia, this is, I guess, a slightly controversial part of it, but in Australia, we have a music media in Triple J, which is frankly pretty bad for like any kind of alternative music. And I think this needs to be included in that same conversation. There's this greater sense that we as Australian musicians in this very small, or Australian music pundits even, in this very small and insular scene, should all have each other's backs. So fuck off the rivalry, I say.
Definitely. I mean, that's something we've had before as well. I mean, I'm a big proponent of that also. The rivalries are just when everyone's trying to hold everyone else down so that they can be the ones on top, nobody wins. Nobody wins. All that happens is we end up with it accentuates and accelerates the other problems and other challenges that we're facing. When we've already got, especially in somewhere like Sydney, issues with venue after venue closing down.
Frankie's just went down over the weekend, man. Like,
numerous reasons. And yes, Valet to Frankie's Pizza down in Sydney.
Yeah.
one for you, Frankie's.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And it makes every other problem worse. It really, really does. And
Definitely,
it's like coming up in the Sydney metal scene in like the late 2000s, early 2010s. It was vibing. Everyone had each other's backs. Everyone was helping each other. It's like, oh, hey, we're putting this really cool show together. What's all the other amazing bands we can get on there? And, if we're not headlining, that's okay. Like, whoever the biggest band is, whoever the best band is, we're going to put them at the top. Or whoever we think the best band is going to go at the top. And then going into the sort of mid-2010s and the later 2010s, it kind of changed.
Got bitter. Got real bitter real quick.
Started getting bitter, and the rivalries started, and people started being more out for themselves. And I get it, because that was when we started to face some of these other challenges.
the lockout laws and things would have started getting the worst part in Sydney at that time, right?
The lockout laws, venues started closing down or limiting the types of gigs they were having. Opportunities started to dry up, and bands, instead of joining together to help each other with it, so many bands got scared and started trying to go, instead of we've got this opportunity, who else can we bring along with it to do the best thing that we can? It was like, we've got this opportunity, we have to protect it from everybody else. We can't let anyone else get a part of our opportunity.
Precious.
Well, it went away. It literally went away from putting on the best show for the whole night, and it went to trying to get your best spot on the bill. Where it went more me focused as opposed to show focused on what the punters wanted.
And it just, so yeah,
It did. It went to shit. It went to shit.
In the core of my soul, I feel that like the rivalry is just, and that accelerated the decline in the scene, especially in Sydney now. And I mean, since moving to Brisbane, I've felt it's a bit different. Brisbane kind of has that same energy from
Brisbane has competition.
Competition
Competition is competition is healthy. Competition is healthy. Competition makes you work harder. Rivalry is you spending your whole time trying to drown the people around you, and it's not healthy. It's toxic,
Yeah,
and
totally.
it doesn't need to be there.
So we always kind of had that the mindset of, you know, we're going to be as good as we can possibly be. And actually, I remember like, and this is actually something I'd point out to a lot of young musicians. I mean, I remember going on tour with bands like Voyager and 12 Foot Ninja and like other amazing Australian bands early in their career, and just being like, wow, we fucking suck. We got to get better. Like that, you know, there's a certain kind of rivalry that can actually be awesome. Like you can
No, that's competition. That's knowing that you can do better. It's when
but generally speaking, fostering the scene, you know, like having those up and coming bands on supports when you're getting bigger and things like that, it can be pretty massive. In terms of a third, but there's a couple of ones that I kind of I could put here, but I want to put one that is like obviously a little bit biased towards the particular musical world that I inhabit. You know, the scene that I kind of exist in, and that's that. I think the idea of needing to conform to a musical model in order to achieve some kind of success is incredibly overrated. I'm going to say fuck that off, but let me explain it a little bit. A lot of people, especially those who kind of are success-minded in terms of like the music industry, like how do I make my band the biggest? We'll usually have some inclination at some point to say like, okay, this scene is working, or this approach to music is working, whatever else. This buzzword is currently kind of in. I'm definitely of the opinion, and Caligula's Horse in the small modicum of success that we've had are kind of proof that this is something that you can sidestep. I'm sort of, and again, it sounds like I'm grandstanding a bit. This is the very biased kind of take, obviously.
Grandstand, my friend, grandstand.
I'm a big believer in the idea that if you do have a really like distinctive approach to how you write, and that's one that is intentionally, you know, tickling you first, like exciting your own musical sensibilities, your artistic sensibilities, your proclivities first, people are going to resonate with that. Whereas I find that a lot of people who have that kind of success-minded, kind of trend-driven approach to writing tend to drop off pretty soon. And I reckon it comes from the idea that, well, if you're writing for someone else, and your song doesn't appeal to someone else, it doesn't sell, it doesn't become a hit or whatever, it's kind of an abject failure, really, by its own merits, right? Whereas on the other hand, if you're writing for yourself and music emotionally excites you or interests you or, you know, whatever, you've succeeded at the very beginning. And then if you do happen to find some success from there, it's just a bonus. So I'm going to say the thing that can fuck off. It's pretty hard for me to like sum it up, but the idea of writing to conform to a trend or an idea, or, you know,
don't write for a scene, write for yourself.
Yeah. As a music writer, be distinctive. Why not?
That's, you know? So good.
And you can absolutely take inspiration from, if something, you know, has become, if something's become trendy and you're like, oh, like I really, really dig that. Like I'm vibing on that. It's new. It's different.
Yeah. This shouldn't be a restrictive thing. I mean, because you know what? If you didn't do that, that would be exactly the opposite, wouldn't it? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just saying, you know, write what you want to hear rather than what you think other people want to hear.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yeah. I get where you're coming from.
I like that. Sure. That's good. It's purity as well in your writing. You're not writing for a purpose. You're writing for yourself.
Yeah, and the way I see it is it's the one judge that I can really reliably have. Like if I'm trying to write for someone else, I got to play the psychological game of what it is that they actually want. And again, it's like you could kind of like, you know, fill in the dots, write by numbers as it were, or you could sit back and say, hey, you know what? That really excites me. Or like, wow, this thing that I just created gave me goosebumps. Maybe that'll transfer to someone else as well. It's the only thing I can really judge when I'm writing music, you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people, certainly, especially younger people entering the scene, I do tend to get the impression that maybe it's not necessarily that's taboo, it's just that's scary. You know, it's frightening to say this is an emotionally vulnerable thing that I like. Maybe someone else will find it cheesy, maybe someone else will find it overwrought, whatever, but it's good for me. I reckon, you know, that's probably, at least as far as I'm concerned, on my little soapbox here, that's the thing that I aim to do, and I think some people it would certainly help them to follow that same kind of sensibility.
I think emotional, you've hit the nail on the head. Emotional vulnerability is a big part of music and being honest in your music writing. And if you're, you know, if there's anyone out there watching that's just starting out in music or is wanting to write some music, maybe Eli, if you're still watching there and you're trying to
write music, Eli.
Music, you know, allowing yourself to be emotionally vulnerable like that is the surest way to connect with people, because people feel it. People can get it. you know, and that adds to that air about a song, some of those intangible qualities that a song can have. And again, the layperson may not be able to describe what it is, but they know when they're feeling it. They know when they're vibing it. So
Definitely. And again, the only way I can know if it's possible for my music to do that is to use myself as a guinea pig. Whereas if, again, I was, sort of going from a series of genre markers I've got a right to conform to or something like that, it's going to be a lot harder to do. You're just going to be guessing most of the time.
yeah, definitely.
One thing I always walked into when I was doing the band stuff. This is for any small bands out there. When you're playing at those small venues and you might get discouraged and anything like that. So one thing you got to understand is that your job as an artist, especially when you're doing music, is to make people feel things. And it doesn't mean a people, you can make a person. So if you're playing at that small venue and you make one person feel something through your music, you've done your job. Because that person will then go tell a friend. And that person will go tell a friend. And that's how you create the realness behind your band. You just got to get out there and, like you said, have that emotional vulnerability and make sure people understand that I've been there too. So go out there and create.
Yeah, like I've had, I've worked with a few different bands, and from different areas. I mean, one of them, Kid Crusher from Adelaide, he does like horrorcore rap kind of stuff, and yeah, like I've been there at shows with him where I'm working with him on stuff, and he's got a couple of songs that are pretty heavy songs about like being in the depths of addiction and the struggle that comes with that. And like people come up after the show, people come up to legitimately after the shows, and they're like, "Man, that song is like I feel that because I've been there, and it's helped me realize I wasn't alone with it. It's helped me come out of that." And it's so important because music like that, connecting with people, can literally save people's lives if you make the right connection with the right person. So it's extremely important. It really is. Yeah, 100% agreeing with all that.
I'm glad you take that organic approach and write for yourself first, and then let the music do its job.
Well, you could imagine, like, I'm pretty good at writing a Caligula's Horse song, but I'd be garbage at writing a Periphery song. You know what I mean? It's like,
I don't know, man.
You want my
I don't know.
So I've actually got another question for you. I was thinking about asking this before. We're kind of into the more just like
relaxed part.
Relaxed part of the
sure.
podcast now. Throwing it on. Something that I've seen or I've encountered with I've heard about from some other bands that are in similar positions to yourself, like they're sort of gaining a bit of success and they've had the opportunity to go and play in Europe or play like in America or wherever. They'll go over there and do those shows and play to like big crowds, big crowds. Like I'm talking, they'll get on, and okay, like sometimes they're festivals, but they'll get on big festivals over in like Europe or the US, and they'll go over there and play those. And then they'll come back here, and when they're touring with the same band over here, they'll be getting 100 or 200 people at a show. Granted, I don't know the kind of numbers that you're necessarily getting in specifically, but how have you found that difference of doing tours internationally and then coming back here to play? Are you finding that you're getting bigger crowds over there, roughly the same, like small? Like, how are you finding the difference? How have you found the difference in crowds in the different areas that you kind of been to in terms of the turnout and the support? Because I know, like, look, we know just by sheer numbers and the fact of how spread out Australia's population is, as just by the nature of the size of the country, it can be very difficult to get a lot of people in one place.
Oh, it's a horrible place to tour in a lot of ways. I don't mean horrible in terms of like the interactions with the crowds and stuff, which are fantastic. It's just logistically, it's very hard to tour Australia, which a lot of people overseas don't know. There's kind of two questions. There's two things that I'd like to address there, I guess. Like one is just the sheer kind of like the numbers, the experience of playing Europe, Australia, how many people come out. The other thing is how different the response you get from the crowds are from like territory to territory. And I might actually start with that because it can kind of make sense of the other thing a little bit more.
Cool.
Like
Yeah.
the thing is, it's worth saying we set a lot of groundwork in Australia before we went overseas. We'd been touring Australia for kind of 3 or 4 years, like, you know, off our own back, doing the van thing. Like, you know, it was like kind of rough tours to shit all people that gradually became a decent amount of people. You know, we're a band who can now kind of sell out like mid-size kind of like clubs and theaters and stuff now in most capital cities. But that took a lot of groundwork to do. So it's worth saying that by the time we started touring Europe, we've toured Europe 3 times now. The most recent one as a headline act, as opposed to support in the previous 2. Numbers aren't hugely dissimilar, but what is different is the way that a crowd interacts. I'll give you one example because it really blew my head off, like when we experienced it. So we did in 2019 a short Latin America run that culminated at the Prog Power USA Festival in Atlanta, and we played on that run Santiago, Chile, and then we played Peru and Mexico. But the Santiago show was really interesting, and a lot of people kind of say this when they tour Latin America. The crowd reaction is kind of unlike anything I had ever seen before. Not only do they sing every lyric, which is obviously par for the course in a headline show, you know, like most places that happens after a while, but they sing every guitar line. Like I'll play a guitar melody and it will be like a soccer chant. Speaking of soccer chants, they did a soccer chant before we came.
Oh,
like,
that is
kind of
mad.
where, like, oh no, it was
Love
absolutely
it.
amazing. Like we all just had goosebumps. Like we just sitting there going, like, what is happening? So we
I'd
played
cry.
Santiago, Chile. First time sight unseen. We had never been there before. We played to 500 people at a headline show. Like our first time going there. So it was one of these things that was just kind of like a again, we didn't know what to expect. If we'd played to 150 people, we would have come home happy. It would have been fine. But we played to a ton of people and they sung every guitar solo I played. So, I mean, you know, like on the one hand, you obviously don't tend to get that in the kind of like, how do I put it, like the Commonwealth kind of like British.
No,
you know,
no,
lineage
yeah, that's fair
world
enough.
where people tend to be a little bit more crossed-armed and stuff like that. Australia, I find, is very similar, like in terms of kind of manner to Britain. Like I don't think it's any coincidence that comparison is often drawn. Europe's a bit different. If you play places like, especially like Western Europe, like Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium and stuff like that, it tends to be a little more kind of understated. It's like a running gag in the music industry, especially like in metal, that Germans will always like tell you that the last time you came and played was better, but you know you still did okay this time. It's a running joke, but it's also quite true.
Yeah.
And then, you know, obviously as you head to like Eastern Europe and stuff, it becomes much more party town. Like people, you know, mosh and jump around and it's a bit more exciting. The point that I'm kind of getting at is like after doing it a bunch of times, we see those different characterizations. The cool thing is there's always some amazing, you know, quality to any of those crowds that is unique, has a feeling of its own. So with that as context, I guess, like in terms of numbers, it's pretty similar most places now. We play like, you know, we can sell out venues in places like Oslo and London and like the, you know, the bigger territories. And we'll play like, you know, medium club venues otherwise, usually pull a decent amount of people. That's usually pretty similar to like our Australian numbers, maybe a little bit lower in like, say, like continental Europe and stuff like that. The US, we had a headline tour, as I said, selling, and we saw just how good those numbers were in the lead up, but that tour was cancelled due to COVID, so we've only ever done festival stuff there. It's hard to say exactly, and obviously Latin America, as I said, was a huge surprise to us, which was a really welcome surprise. So yeah, I guess like to sum it up, crowds are so different, you get a different value from...
Bro, you selling out theaters in London? That is hectic.
Yeah, so our 2018 European tour, we sold out a reasonably big venue in London. I mean, like, but again, that was our third time playing in London. You know, after a couple of support shows, we actually did a headline in our 2017 tour where we played with Opeth and you did a couple of support shows around Europe as well. But yeah,
we've never had anyone on this podcast who's like, we sold out a couple of venues in London. Jesus Christ! I'm born in the. I'm born in the,
for us too.
Bro,
I'm born
from the UK. Like I'm an immigrant from the UK. Love me country, love Australia. But I'll tell you what, Dude, that's unreal. That is so cool.
That's good though, and I mean, really, that's kind of like I guess that's the dream, right? To be able to jet off and do all this stuff and go, or you know, we wanted like I mean, for me, like I mean, yeah, okay, I got to record in the US and I got to play a show in New York, right? That's as far abroad as I've gone with my music ever, and that to me was like that's that's the dream. You know what I mean? Like I've done the dream. Anything else beyond this is like, you know.
Can you imagine that just going over to London, right, and being like, show sold out, we sorted. We don't have to worry. Like we're getting paid.
I mean, that tends to be one of the ones that is like the most reliable. But I mean, it is for a lot of bands like in the circuit. Like London is an amazing music scene.
Did you play in Camden Town?
What's that?
Have you ever been to that Camden Town? Yeah.
Camden. I think most venues we've played have been either like Camden or nearby.
Man, that is the alternate city. The alternate. It's a whole.
Cool.
It's like you walk into a portal when you go into Camden Town. It's like Newtown but on crack.
Yeah, it's great. But no, I mean that was that was one that we built up quite a bit. Like, you know, again, every time we've been to Europe, we've played there. When we did that short run in 2017, which, like I said, like we did some shows with Opeth, Anathema, Pain and Salvation, and some festivals. But we did like 3 headlines around a couple of different places, just main markets. And that was the first time we sold London out in 2017. Some small little, you know, shitty upstairs club with no AC. It was just fucking awesome. It was
They don't have AC in the UK.
The cool thing is we've built that. It blew my head off actually that it was that hot in there because it was London, you know. But anyway, but no, then you know, sold out a bigger venue the next time. And the thing is, we know we expect progressively for these places to get bigger. The spanner in the works is obviously COVID. Like, you know, it's kind of hard to say what will happen when we go back. It should by all accounts be good, but promoters are scared as well, you know, like fees are lower. You probably heard this. This is like endemic to the whole music industry right now. It's not just that tours are, you know, or at least over the last 6 months have been a little more kind of tentative, like you're a bit more concerned as to whether they're going to happen or not. It's also that fees are lower. People are not buying tickets in advance; they're buying tickets to the doors, which is really bad for your bottom line. Like, well, not so much in terms of your bottom line, more your budgeting, should I say, like, you know, ordering merch, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, you know, we were in a pretty good place in 2020. Hopefully, now that everything's going back, and not to spoil anything really, but we'll be overseas next year for sure. A couple of different places, but I shall zip my mouth for the moment. Just
if you head to the UK again, I'll be telling my cousin to make sure he drags the wife out and goes to see her.
Surely will be. But yeah, I mean, you know, like all of this will kind of open again, and hopefully it becomes business as usual again. I mean, not like any of us could have seen just how kind of catastrophic the pandemic.
It turns out someone sneezed and they shut down the whole world. Like, geez.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, you bang on with the ticket sales point. It's something I've noticed at, I mean, even at the most local levels of stuff, shifting tickets, pre-sale tickets for shows, has been such a chore. Since even, as you know, I mean, Brisbane was sort of not quite as affected through most of the pandemic, but even here, it was so easy. The same thing.
People just didn't know if a gig was going to get cancelled or something, you know?
Or like the band they were going to see was going to pull out, you know? They don't know. It was happening so frequently. It's such a deterrent for getting the pre, or if they were going to get sick and not be able to go.
That's it. And actually, you know what? It was funny. So we did a headline tour in April. And we had we had a band called Relica on main support. They're absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't heard of them, they go on places right now. They're sort of blasting off. But we had like one member of that band get COVID per leg of the tour.
Oh,
like it was so heavy. Our tour manager got COVID. We all got COVID, like a bit over a week out. Obviously, at that point, we had the week. What's the word? Isolation period. We all managed to make the tour, like just by the grace of God, as it were. But our tour manager got COVID right before. Relica managed to get COVID. Like I think every member by the end of it had COVID at some point. It was just like a nightmare. Like the fact that tour happened and was a success was absolutely. I mean, it was a roll of the dice at one point.
Yeah.
I mean, gone either way.
Yeah, like I had it in. I think I came down with it around Easter of this year. and it
That would have
was
been the same. So this was April, yeah.
yeah, and it was yeah. I would not wish it on anyone.
Mate, my
Fuck.
wife's going round 2 on it now.
Oh no, really?
Actually, our drummer
Fuck.
Josh just had round
I
two.
just I tested myself today, and lucky enough,
You got all those antibodies now.
well,
eh?
no, what ended up happening last time? My kids got it, and I hung around it the whole time, and then 2 months later, I got it.
Interesting. So we all got it at the same time in my family, but my wife was totally asymptomatic, like 100%. She tested positive, had no symptoms. I mean, I didn't get quite as lucky, but look,
yeah.
I was on tour,
died.
like a bit over a week later.
It floored me when I had it.
Poor
Like
mate.
I spent about 2 days just like I'd be awake for an hour, then like dozing for half an hour, and then awake for an hour. And it was destroyed me.
I'll tell you. I mean, it's a bit off topic, but so like COVID was pretty rough. But I caught a flu, like just from my son's daycare, like a couple of months, like still in the kind of recovery period, I guess, after COVID. And I'll tell you what, man, like after isolating for 2 years and having 0 flu antibodies. By the way, I didn't get my flu shot because like I got COVID right around that same period, so it just kind of I just couldn't. And this thing knocked me out. I thought I was going to die. Like I was so wrecked from this.
The immunity debt
Yeah,
is real.
it's gone, man.
The immunity debt's real, and this is what they're saying. Like
No joke.
there's a bunch of kids now that grew up with basically 2
Yeah.
years of not getting
Mate,
sick.
my
not
kids
interacting
Well,
got
I'm
sick.
seeing
My
this
kids
from
got
my son,
sick constantly for the
and
last
then you get
year.
then they get sick again. Then they go out into the world and they get dirty and they get exposed to all this stuff
man,
again, and
that
their
daycare,
immune
like, I
systems have
swear,
not built up.
the strains of illnesses that just like the cocktails of illnesses
man.
that right now exist.
When
in
I
those
took
places.
when we went to Fiji, I'm like, kids, don't wash your hands. Go play with whatever you want. Go get them overseas antibodies.
Let 'em
just,
get some-
yeah, just go nuts.
Oh man.
That would have been a shit holiday though with them.
No, they were all
feed
good.
for it.
They were all good. Then we got back, and the wife got COVID.
Speaking of illnesses, I got a rant, mate.
Oh,
Here we go.
I got a
wow.
rant. Have you got? Do we have
Wow.
rants?
Wow.
Cut away for rants or
Oh,
not?
dude, I got the cutaway for Reds. Let's do the cutaway for Reds. I can't.
Hit it.
Raf's got
Hit
a
it.
red. Raf's got a red.
I got a rant, and this is, oh mate, this is just. It's okay. It's not
Raf
just
doesn't
about
normally
illness.
have a red.
It's not just about illnesses, but it ties into it.
Okay.
So, obviously, we're all aware of the absolute fucking shit show that was Splendor in the Grass.
Yeah, yeah, we spoke
We're
about
all
it.
aware. We've spoke about that multiple times. We're aware that there was at least one death from meningococcal related to that festival.
That's a poo disease, just to make everyone.
Spilt Milk Festival in Canberra. 18-year-old girl died from meningococcal after attending Spilt Milk Festival in Canberra earlier this month or late last month.
How come I haven't heard about this?
It's there. It's there. It wasn't big news because it's not the fucking, it's already happened. So it's just not the fucking deal. Something is fucking going on with music festivals since COVID. Right? And I don't know if it's down to their costs being higher, so they're cutting corners elsewhere, or what the fuck is going on. But like so many music festivals that have started back this year since COVID's eased up and they've been able to do these things, so many of these festivals have just been a shit show. Not just here in the US as well. We talked about Blue Ridge Rock Festival.
Yeah, we did.
Like all this fucking shit. We're talking like.
Didn't that guy get killed by hay bale?
Food vendors not being sufficient. There not being sufficient like toilets and transport to get people in and out of these places. Not being sufficient accessibility options for people. Clearly not sufficient hygiene stuff when we're talking about these issues with meningococcal at these festivals. Like, I understand that the festivals organizers are still trying to make money, and they're trying to say, well, okay, we have to put more money into XYZ because we're coming out of COVID and we need to take these precautions. But I don't know where the fuck they're cutting corners that this shit's going so wrong. They need to sort their shit out.
What?
Because if it keeps going on, then they will just not happen. Like these festivals are just not gonna fucking happen because people will you know, they just the councils won't license them to happen. It's going to be that simple.
Hold on. What was that
Like-
festival called?
Spilt milk.
No.
If you just go Spilt milk, meningococcal, you'll see it. A young lady by the name of Ali Bean, may she rest in peace. She, you know, they had to turn her life support off. Basically, is how severe it got.
Oh, wow.
And it's horrid. Like, I mean, I don't. Look, I haven't been to a major music festival since COVID, so I don't know. You know what I want to, what's going on. Like, I haven't experienced the situations happening there myself, but like, these
Okay.
fucking they need to sort this shit out.
Okay, so we basically have this year 12 school leaver who obviously had the rest of her life ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
Is and what? And it has a vaccine preventable disease. Oh, okay. See, that takes a different sort of approach on it. So she's obviously hasn't had a meningococcal shots. But this is just what I'm reading here. This is obviously a journalist that's tried to spin it any way she wants.
Yeah, but this is what I mean. Like, it's not just this festival. This is. I don't know what it is. It's every time, pretty much every. I mean, I've even seen shit about good things.
Yes.
And some stuff, you know, how like some people have said it was amazing, it went down really well. Other people have said it was horribly disorganized. People talking about food vendors running out of food. And I know that's not necessarily the festival organizer's fault, but like what it's a constant theme. It's a constant theme since festivals have come back after COVID, and I don't know how to fix it because I don't know exactly where the problems lie.
Okay.
Something has to change.
So if I'm reading this article correctly, this is she may or may not have passed from something that could have been sorted out with a vaccination. So meningococcal B.
Yeah. But
regardless, it should not. We live in a first world country where it should not get dirty enough, where you get meningococcal.
like, okay, so the free vaccine for meningococcal that's given to high school students doesn't protect against the meningococcal B strain.
Oh, sorry, I read that wrong. My bad. It doesn't.
Okay. But there, you know, and yes, there's people pushing to include the meningococcal B vaccine in the free one that's given to high
Yeah,
school.
but regardless, we live in a first world country. It should not be fucking happening.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, you know, when you're talking about Splendor in the Grass, people were literally wading through piss and shit and vomit to get
It
into the festival.
should not be happening. Regardless of whether you can or cannot be vaccinated, you should not be waiting around in shit.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like, I mean, Sam, I mean, I don't know. You guys probably haven't played any festivals since COVID has sort of not ended, but declined to the point where these things can run again. But I mean,
We had Brad on. He was a security guard at that
Brad.
what festival was that? The
Splendor.
Splendor.
Yeah.
And he said the conditions were horrendous.
Yeah, Brad from does vocals for Nuclear Vision. I don't know if you're familiar with the band at all, Sam, but he works as a security guard as well. And yeah, his team were up there down there doing Splendor, and it was
Ankle deep in water, on bunk beds,
Yep.
shit everywhere.
Yeah, of course. No, we were booked to play Uncaged Festival, which was going to be one of the kind of first festivals back. You know, early what would that have been? Like, I guess early 2022. I think it was February or March or something like that. I might be misremembering. But that was, you know, I mean, I don't want to say it's necessarily endemic to other festivals, but we ended up pulling out because our fee wasn't paid. So we ended up pulling out, and we did a headline tour in that period instead. And I know a lot of other people did that too. I think you're probably right in saying that there is just a general, maybe it's a reticence to kind of put the money forward, probably for the reasons I was describing, and you know, the same issues that we have in like the kind of headline circuit and stuff. Obviously, much higher stakes with a festival and much greater amounts of money. But it's true. It's tricky to say what you do about it when attendance is, or at least has historically been over the last year or so, lower. You know, like the bottom line has to be cut. I'm not going to be devil's advocate here because I think I generally agree with you. I haven't seen enough to really be convinced that's true necessarily, but I definitely get a sense that festivals are having to cut costs somewhere.
Yeah, the
So,
model the model's struggling. I think
It
is-
should
is-
not be
yeah,
in amenities. It should not be in amenities.
Yeah,
like,
for sure, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like 100%. Like amenities, it's clear from these issues that toilets and just general cleanliness
It's a
needs
must.
to be that you can't cut on those. You just simply can't. You're gonna lead to situations like this, which just means that the council that approves you having the festival there, next time they're just gonna say no.
Yep.
And I mean, the situation with Splendor in the Grass, I mean, we are so lucky that there wasn't a greater loss of life for the conditions that festival went ahead in. Like the severe weather, the wind, the rain, just the horrid conditions that took place in. The fact that they cancelled all the acts for the Friday.
Should have just been enough just to go pull the plug.
The road in and out was flooded. Like, what? How do you not cancel? I know, I get it. It's late in the day. People have already travelled to Queensland or to Byron to try and go, but you got to make a call and you got to put the fans' safety first.
Oh, it's too many dollars and no common sense.
And I get look, the people from Splendor were put in a tough position. I wouldn't have wanted to have made that decision myself. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, do you cancel it and upset people and lose money in that regard, but say, look, we had to do this for people's safety?
Yeah.
Or do you go ahead and you put people's safety was at risk, and people got, at least one person got meningococcal and died from that. Like, that's going to be more, I think that's more damage arguably more damage to the reputation long term. And whatever's going on with festivals, they need to sort their fucking shit out. They need to get it sorted, because if it keeps happening, it's just not going to be anymore. And we're going to end up back where we were, when Big Day Out was gone and Soundwave was gone, and we're like, oh, we don't really have any...
The worst part about it is you can't even blame poor management for this. Like, you can blame poor management, whatever, but it's going to get to the stage where festivals are really going to become such a liability for councils that insurances won't cover it. So they're just not going to happen. If one person goes, one or two people pass every time a festival happens, they're just going to say, exactly like Raph said, they're just going to say, mate, it's not worth it. We're not getting sued. No.
Yeah, exactly. So it's becoming a mess all across the board. It's not just Australia; it's happening in America as well.
It is.
I haven't seen reports out of Europe, so I can't comment on that. But
at the same time, punters need to take responsibility, man, because I've been in some fucking heinous ass toilets at Big Day Out and shit. You all need to pick up your game, aim better, and not spread your shit all over the wall. I've been in some heinous ass porta toilets.
If there's shit on the wall, that is on whoever shat on the wall.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell my worst one, and I'm sorry to, you know what, ladies, you're the more disgusting than some of the blokes, because when I walk into some of them porta toilets and you see used pads sitting on the wall, fuck off out of here, man. The shit's gross. You know who you are. Right. Sort your shit out.
All right. Well, with that lovely story, I think we might take it home. We might wrap things up. So, once again, quick reminder, as we said, because we have made affiliate, and thank you again to everybody who helped us get over the line for affiliate. By
thank
the way,
you so much.
Means a lot to us that we can do this and have even this small amount of monetization and have an opportunity to make even a tiny scrap of money off of this. It's not why we're doing it, but it does make it easier for us to do these things. So again, like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. If you want to support us, you can give us a paid subscription. Helps us keep this shit going. And again, if you have Amazon Prime, you get a free subscription you can put down monthly. So if you're not putting that up towards anyone else and you want to put it towards us, that would be very much appreciated. We really, really do appreciate that. Once again, we are looking for your crazy stories from gigs, or if you're in a band, crazy road stories.
Eli, Sam, I'm looking at you.
I'm sure you got some wild stories from the road. So yeah, if anyone wants to send those road stories in, please do. We will change all of the names to keep people anonymous. But yeah, once we get a bit of a collection of those, we're going to start reading them out on streams for people. And I'll tell you what, next week we got a pretty cool guest lined up. We got Artemis Blade coming on next week. So join us Thursday next week for that. I should be on Tuesday again, back with the studio streams as well. So that'll be fun. Tune in. We'll have some fun there. I'll be practicing some stuff. I might fuck around with some studio sessions on some different songs. Who knows? And just a quick reminder again, everybody, we do have our end of year stream coming up on the 29th of December. That's going to be a little bit different to our normal stuff. That's going to be a longer stream than normal. We're going to run, probably start a little bit early, definitely go a lot later. There's going to be lots of drinking games. We're going to have a bunch of return guests popping in and out. We're going to be doing trivia. We're going to be, listening to and playing a bunch of weird and wonderful film clips of all different weird shit that we've found. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun. So,
and just to be aware, man, we're obviously going to get copyright striked on that stream, so it's not going to go up on YouTube. The only place you're going to be able to see it is on Twitch on that night or in the VOD afterwards if they keep it up.
That's going to be live stream only for sure, because otherwise, we're definitely going to get copyright striked. And you know what? I mean, I don't know. Some of the language is probably... I mean, we're not necessarily conservative with our language, but I feel like our language is
going to get out of hand.
Really out of hand on that one.
And there's going to be a magic wheel, a drinking wheel.
Oh, you're setting that up, are you?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. All right. Yeah, so... Thank you very, very much once again to our esteemed guest. Sam, what have you got anything interesting coming up that you want to talk about other than what we mentioned before?
Plug.
What do you
want to plug?
Highly classified at this point. But look, look, stay on top of our socials if you're interested. I mean, if you're watching this for Seahorse reasons, you probably already are. But we'll be announcing a lot of stuff and kind of giving you some little sneak peeks into things really soon. I mean, early in the new year. So unfortunately for now, zip. But it'll be around very soon.
Make sure you hit us up before you release it, and we'll get you back on.
Of course.
Go and follow Caligula's Horse on everything.
Please
go and
do, man.
Shit.
Change your life.
Play their music so loud that the neighbors get a taste, because that's the only way to listen to that shit.
And if there's one thing I will say about this band, it's probably one of the best bands I've ever heard through my phone. So they're that good. They're that good. They're that good.
Actually interesting.
Yeah, they're that good.
Compliment.
Love it. Kyle, what have you got anything coming up with Beer Buddy?
So we have got Gymna. We've got all the Gymna stuff coming up, and then straight after this, I'm hopping over to my Twitch page, Beer Buddy 86, and I'm going to be doing I'm going to be doing a video game playthrough on High on Life, the new game that's come out on Xbox, which has got the voices of the guy that does Rick and Morty.
Oh, yep.
So I'll be having a crack on that. I had a little teaser last night, and it's an interesting game. It's vulgar. It's so good.
That's great. That's really, really cool. All right, yeah. So make sure you go and check that one out as well. Once again, massive thank you to Sam for coming on to talk to us.
Thank
mate.
you so
really,
much,
really
Sam. We really do.
it.
My pleasure. Thanks for the awesome chat, boys.
You have been amazing to talk to.
The doctor.
I feel like there's so much more we can talk about. I would love to get you on to do like some stuff talking about musical history and rock music history. I'm sure you're extremely knowledgeable in that area and have a lot of insight to share. Sorry, Dr. Sam. Thank you once again for coming on.
Which I have never gone by, but yes, thank you.
Well, that's what we're calling you from now on, Doc.
That's it now. That's it. You fucking let the genie out the bottle now. All right, yeah. Look, once again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Eli, for hopping in the chat. Thank you, Biggest E, for subscribing, for following. Sorry, and thank you for everyone who's tuned in and watched.
I'll see you all.
Again, this will be available on our YouTube and on the podcast stream. So hopefully you can catch it somewhere if you're not watching the live stream now, you're not hearing this now, so it doesn't really matter. But look, as always, we all know the world's been pretty rough for the last little while. Let's look out for each other, guys. Let's take care of each other. Be kind to yourself and everyone else, because you deserve it. Thank you again. Thank you for tuning in, everybody, and we'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.
Peace out, homies.